Is Chevis Watson here? Chevis Watson?
David Butts. I'm in District 1. And, yeah, talking about misleading, I think probably this petition is totally misleading. I see it as a creature of a group basically from this conservative think tank called Texas Public Policy Foundation. I think it's basically designed to sort of set the city up so that it can be attacked, probably, as Ms. Troxclair did, run down to the state legislature at the end of the street here, the Reichstag, and basically, you know, launch an attack on the city to try to undermine it because they didn't adopt some sort of cost savings. This is funded by dark money, totally, and, you know, it's hidden, and we'll never know who gave this money or where it came from, unless they choose to reveal it, of course. And I welcome the opportunity to have a campaign on this issue. I really do. I'm reminded of the Uber campaign, and I think that this will be very entertaining, to say the least. So I would strongly urge you to put it on the ballot. However you choose to do is up to you. We'll defeat it either way, quite honestly. Of course, they'll try to pour a lot of dark money in, but we'll point that out very clearly. So once again, you understand, I think every one of you understand exactly what this is. It's a spear aimed at the city of Austin by a group of extreme conservatives who are out to undermine this city. They do not like this city. They resent this city. And the rot starts at the top, at the governor's office, and goes down. So basically, if we're going to have an election, we'll have an election. Okay? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I have a question, Mr. Butts.
Councilor Garza? Mr. Butts?
Mr. Butts.
Yes.
I have a question. I guess following the line of question the mayor was asking, I guess not knowing campaigns and PACs and stuff, I thought that any kind of, explain the dark money part. I thought any kind of PAC usually files. So do they choose to file a certain kind of PAC where they don't have to disclose the donors?
I'm sorry.
That's it.
There was a PAC, actually a 501(c) called Austin Civic Future, or Civic Future, I think, that's been on file. It's gone through transition of leaders or members of this PAC, this foundation, I shouldn't call it. It's not a PAC. It's able to basically take money from all kinds of sources without reporting where the money came from. And that money, that $137,000 that the mayor referenced, was passed on to Mr. Searle's PAC and spent to basically generate this petition. Who it came from, I can guess almost, but basically that's how it operates. The people that are the board of directors, one was once the president of the Young Americans for Prosperity. And if that sounds vaguely familiar to the Koch brothers, you'd probably be right about that. And the others are basically involved with TPP, Texas Public Policy Foundation front groups, who, you know, basically don't like the city of Austin. And I doubt they have our best intentions, if I had to guess.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, can I ask a question?
Yes.
So, Mr. Butts, in response to Councilmember Garza's question, I think what we're hearing is that the reporting, such that our laws are right now, they can report that the money came from this foundation, but the foundation or group does not have to report who gave to them. So that's what we're seeing in terms of dark money. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, and we also have a situation where there's been a request, or multiple people have requested that that the groups involved tell us who gave the money, and they've refused to date. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so the calls for transparency from that group seems kind of ironic to me, that the calls for transparency to the voters so the voters understand what's going on, but at the same time not being transparent with the voters in terms of who's paying for it?
Well, I think that just is indicative of their intentions, honestly.
And a more complete answer, an additional to make complete answer, is when we passed our ethics ordinance requiring this, we had a section that concerned covered transactions. And covered transactions were a contribution that was made to a 501c4 for the purpose of being given to a PAC that would then be spent. And under city ordinances, a contribution that was made to a 501c4 for that purpose by a person, that person needs to be disclosed by the person by the 501c4. So it's still an outstanding question as to whether or not the 501c4 in this case took any money from anybody who knew that the money they were giving was going to be used in this PAC campaign, in which case under our ordinances they would be required to report. But in fairness to these folks, they're not the only ones that are doing it. There are other organizations in our city right now also participated on the other ballot measure that are taking secret money and not disclosing who gave that money as well. So it's a growing issue in our city.
But I guess where I was going, I'm sorry, Councilor Houston, just along these lines is if you want to be transparent, there is an avenue to do that. There's a way to file a PAC where you're required to show the individual donors. There's a way to do that.
Certainly they could do that if they wanted to. Ms. Houston.
Thank you. And I guess this is a question for Mr. Butts or the mayor or Councilmember Kitchen. 30-some thousand people signed a petition. Are we saying that because we don't know where the money came from that the petitions are invalid or the people are invalid? I don't hear any concerns about people being illegal. We're focusing on where the money came from, and the petition is still valid, right?
Yes, it's valid.
30-some thousand registered voters said, we need an efficiency audit. So that's what I need to focus on. The other part of what I need to focus on is it something wrong with having an efficiency audit? I mean, are we not paying attention to the fact that there's things in any organization that could be different, more creative, done more efficiently, save some money? I'm for that because the property tax owners, and I keep saying that in District 1, are saying you can't keep coming to us, City of Austin, to pay all these things. So if we could find some efficiencies in this organization, wouldn't that be beneficial to the public?
Well, of course it would, but of course the question is, what would the council choose to adopt? If they come back and say, well, you need to sell off the Austin Energy, or you need to basically go from a pension fund to a 401k for your employees and let them go out on the market, they'll come up with all kinds of reasons and rationales why you need to make trimmings financially, some of which might have validity and some which will not. If you choose not to do it, then people will go to the Capitol, or they'll use it as a campaign issue, which is exactly what I think this is partly directed at. Not for this campaign per se, but in the future, to basically say that the council or this council member has failed to make these savings, and so therefore, you need to vote them out. So it's a political tool as much as it is anything else. And, the fact is, you can get signatures on just about any petition in this city you want to. That's true. Now, they were paying an extraordinary amount of money to get those signatures that they got. But,
So I guess those are a lot of assertions. I don't know. I'm not a political being.
Right.
But those are some assertions. My thing is, how do we make sure that we're operating as efficiently as we can? And we've had conversation today and at the work session about audits that have come through our wonderful program audit that nothing happens. We lose money.
That's a decision the council has to make.
Well, but prior councils haven't made it, and we're hopeful that this council would, this city manager will look at that and say, okay, this is something we've got to do, and we've got to do something about this. And I don't know that any of that other stuff that you're talking about is true. I happen to want to have an efficiency study so
I
that
assure
we
you
can.
the dark money is true.
Well, but I'm talking about not the money. I'm talking about the outcome. I'm talking about the product.
Well-
And so when you do that, you obfuscate what the real issue is for me. That's
No,
all I
don't.
need to say.
I can just tell you that right now. The real issue is how this is being used as a political tool.
Those are all the speakers that we have. Anybody else signed up to speak? Sponge? I didn't have you, but clerk will note that. Go ahead.
Oh, are you one of the extreme conservatives that are behind this petition?
Yes, I consider conserving our planet Earth being very conservative, and I put myself in that camp. I'm Bill Bunch, Executive Director, Save Our Springs Alliance, District 5. I want to first say, ask you to not put the charter amendments on the ballot and delete those from this ordinance. Neither of those two are really needed, and you're clearly just doing it to fend off the Charter Commission recommendations that were worked on. Great deal, and put those off for 2 to 2.5 years. I think that's disrespecting the work of your commission and your citizens. My next point is on the ballot language. All this discussion about policy is irrelevant to the issue in front of you right now. And I feel kind of like a broken record from a few months ago when we told you you're violating the law by not putting the Code Next petition on the ballot, and you didn't listen. You're in a ministerial position. You have an obligation to put this on the ballot. And Article 4, Section 5 of the Charter reads as follows. The ballot used in voting upon an initiated or referred ordinance shall state the caption of the ordinance. And, that's number 1, below the caption shall set forth on separate lines the words for the ordinance and against the ordinance. Your ordinance, page 47, violates both of those provisions. For Proposition J, the Code Next petition ordinance, and for the audit ordinance, Proposition K. Neither of those are stating the captions of the ordinance. The amendment offered by Councilmember Kitchen and Mayor Adler exacerbate the violation that's here by adding the 3 years, which is both false and is electioneering on the ballot. There's lots of ways you can violate people's voting rights. And one of those ways is rigging the ballot by writing ballot language that is not the caption of the ordinance, that violates your own charter, that doesn't ask, are you for the ordinance or against the ordinance, but says yes or no in violation of your charter, or that makes an extended argument about the policy. The policy's irrelevant. You're here to follow the charter. And y'all posted this amendment, Mayor Adler and Councilmember Kitchen, at pretty much exactly the same time you were talking about restoring public trust in the context of Code Next and our Land Development Code.
Thank you.
Is this public trust?
Thank you, Mr.
That
Bunch.
is not a rhetorical question. I want an answer.
Your
Are
time-
you restoring public trust with your amendment from
Your time
4
is
o'clock
up.
this afternoon?
Thank you for your participation.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to
Thank you,
speak.
Susan.
I'd like to speak to my amendment.
Ken?
Three years is false. You don't get to do that. Bottom line.
Go ahead, Ann.
I would like to speak to the amendment. The purpose behind the amendment with regard to the Land Development Code is clarity and transparency to the public. I will read from the ordinance. The ordinance says that, A, there's a waiting period. The waiting period is June 1st, following the next regularly scheduled. Mr. Bunch, I'm just making an argument. I'm not We can talk at another time. I'm just.
Yeah, we're through. We're not doing any more
Well, I'm
public
here to
testimony.
answer questions if somebody else asks one about whether
No.
what you're saying is accurate.
I'm
No,
reading
wait. You talk to us.
Okay, I'm
Because
sorry.
your discussions are with us.
Sorry. Okay. So to my colleagues, what I'm attempting to do with this language is clarity for the public. I think it's appropriate and necessary for us to be clear. And so the language about a total of up to 3 years is reflecting what is in the ordinance. The ordinance talks about a waiting period, and I'm going to read the language from the ordinance. It says until the June 1st, this is the time period under the waiting period, June 1st following the next regularly scheduled council elections after council adopts Code Next or the comprehensive revisions. And then the second period is the voter approval period, which is after the next available municipal election. So this is confusing language, but that's why I think it's important for the public to understand that the ballot has time periods in it. And there are 4 steps. First, the council would adopt a comprehensive revision. Second, it has to wait until after the next regularly scheduled council election, and then after that is June 1st, and then after that is the next available municipal election before the public gets to vote. So I think that this is not an attempt, and I would never attempt to suggest one way or the other people want to vote on it. They just need to know what they're voting on. And I think it's appropriate because there's a 2-part time period in here, and I think it's appropriate, and we owe it to the voters to tell them and have that language in it. That's it. I don't think that this language is an attempt to say one way or the other how people should vote.
Okay. Further discussions from the dais? Yes, Flanagan?
So I really appreciate that, Councilmember Kitchen, and just to keep my comments focused on the land development code issue. I think the waiting period, just saying waiting period to your point, is insufficient because it is a very significant and unusual definition of waiting period. I think the following a subsequent council election is a very operative phrase in that, and I don't know that I have the will of the dais to include that specific phrase, but it is far more than just a waiting period. It is more significant than that. So I support what you're saying because I think it is a critical element. It is almost a majority of the ordinance, it being both the waiting period and half of the voter approval being about the time length. So I think it's a really important component.
Okay. We have the base motion. Does someone want to amend in the amendments?
There it's after 12 o'clock.
After 12 o'clock. I think we're at the place where we can take votes on these and move forward. So, Ms. Kitchen, do you want to make the amendment?
I thought I had. I move to amend the base motion with Proposition J language that I put out.
Is there a second to that amendment? Mr. Renteria seconds that. Any discussion on the amendment? Yes, Councilmember Alter.
I would like to propose a substitute amendment of option 1 from the memo. Shall a city ordinance be adopted to require a waiting period and voter approval before Code Next or subsequent comprehensive land development revisions become effective? That would be for Proposition J.
Okay. So Councilmember Alter moves to amend that Particle 8 to take out for a total of 3 years and to add in Code Next prior to the comprehensive revisions.
And I'll second that.
Okay. Seconded by, did you want to second that, Mayor Pro Tem? Okay, Mayor Pro Tem seconds that. moving to amendment to take out a total of up to 3 years and to add Code Next prior to the comprehensive revisions. Those are the two substantive changes.
Code next door.
What? Sorry?
It's 2 words, code next door.
Code Next Door. Those are the changes. It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion?
So this is,
What I would say is I'm not going to support this amendment because I think it is not presenting to the voters an accurate description of what's happening. I also agree that the language of up to 3 years is important because the waiting period associated with this actually is explained at length in the document that was given to the people to sign on their petition. It goes into a lot greater detail. It talks about not going into effect until there's a next city council election so that there could be a change of city councils in the meantime. And then not even just that. After that city council election, you have to wait until the following June in order to be able to go. But it still can't be effective. Even then, it has to wait even past that to get to the next election period. So I think a 3-year delay is an integral part of this. It is intended to allow for enough time for a change of council and for a public vote. And I think that if you just say a waiting period, people don't understand that. And it was a large part of the description. Second, when I take the court's direction with respect to whether we include the words Code Next or not, it was argued to the court that this wasn't ripe for her to rule on the substantive issues that we had presented. And her basis for saying that was that there was no Code Next. It wasn't a product, and it would either be passed or wouldn't be passed, so that she couldn't make that decision with respect to anything that was Code Next. She had to look at just comprehensive land development changes, be it this one or be it one sometime in the future. And I think we went to the court. We said that we would follow the court's direction, and I think the court was very specific with respect to that. So I'm not going to support the Alter amendment. Further discussion. Councilmember Poole.
I'm supporting the Alter amendment that Mayor Pro Tem seconded for a lot of reasons, but I'll just say 2. This is the clearest and most verbatim representation of what was in the petition language in its caption, and all of the additional information that you're talking about, Mayor, can accompany the educational materials that we would use in order to talk to the public about what this would mean. But I think the cleanest and the clearest approach on, frankly, both of these propositions is to go directly from the petition caption with as directly and succinctly as possible. So I support what Councilmember Alter is moving.
Any further discussion before we vote on the amendment? Mayor Pro Tem, did you want to speak?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
I seconded the motion and intend to support it. I think it's really, for many of the same reasons Councilmember Poole said, I think we need to, I believe that we should stick as closely to the language on the petition as possible. And I know part of the argument in dropping Code Next is that earlier today we decided not to continue with that particular process. And I've also heard the argument that Code Next is how we branded the discussion about the land development code revision, but it's absolutely true for me and the people I'm talking to. I mean, the conversation, and I don't mean just the people I'm talking to here at City Hall, but the people who stop us in the grocery store or talk to us in the dry cleaners or in the parks. I mean, everywhere I go, people are talking about Code Next, and that is their understanding of the land development code revision. And so I think it's really critical that we include that Code Next. That's become, for good or for bad, that's become the common parlance at the moment for what it means to have a comprehensive land development revision. And I want people to understand that they are voting on this issue and have that context that's been built up over the last couple of years to help guide their decision on that ballot measure. So I really believe strongly that it's important to have Code Next in the ballot language.
Councilmember Flanagan.
So I I appreciate, Mayor Pro Tem, your analysis on our decision earlier today. But as the sponsor of that action and that motion, that to me at least is irrelevant to why I am not going to support the amendment. For me, it is about Judge Naranjo's ruling that says that she couldn't determine anything about Code Next or if it was appropriate to vote on because it was not a product, it was a process, it was not finished. So even if we had not taken that action earlier, it would still be true to the judge's ruling that it wasn't a thing, it was a process. And so to me, that's the operative question. So I just don't want there to be confusion about what action we were taking earlier today.
Okay. Councilmember Alter.
Thank you. I think where I'm at is I think that in both of these propositions, we should be putting forward the simpler language. In both cases, we have over 30,000 folks who signed a petition asking to have an ability to vote on these. With respect to Code Next, I think including the word Code Next in there is really important to rebuilding the trust that we've been trying to rebuild. And I am feeling a little bit like we're in a Groundhog Day situation, and I think by putting the word Code Next in there, we can avoid that. I really don't relish being part of a city that is constantly being sued for doing things that run counter to the citizens' efforts to put forward initiatives which they have the right to do by the charter. And I think that we would be on much stronger footing, both for rebuilding trust and for being true to the charter's requirements if we go with the simpler language.
Anything else before we vote on the amendment? Let's take a vote on the amendment. Those in favor of the Alter amendment, please raise your hand. The Mayor Pro Tem, Poole, Troxclair, and Alter. Those opposed, please raise your hand. Balance of the dais with Councilmember Houston off. It is defeated 4-6-1. Any further amendments? I handed out language that related to the audit. Has Mayor Adler in the upper right-hand corner. I don't remember what the proposition number is on that.
It's K.
What is do we know what number letter that was? J? K? Proposition. So I would suggest move the, by way of amendment, the language that's in K.
I move that. We accept.
You move that? Mr. Renteria moves that. Is there a second to that? Councilmember Kassar seconds that. Any discussion on the Renteria amendment for Proposition K? Renteria made the motion, seconded by Councilmember Kassar. But the language, it's the yellow page, the upper right-hand corner, it says Mayor Adler. And then the language for K is, it doesn't say K, it just has the language. Without using the existing internal city auditor or existing independent external auditor, shall the city code be amended to require an efficiency study of the city's operational and fiscal performance performed by a third-party audit consultant at an estimated cost of $1 to $5 million. It's been moved and seconded. Discussion. Councilmember Troxclair.
I know that my repeated requests earlier to take an up or down vote on number 112 were ignored, but I just wanted to ask one more time if we were able to take a vote on that item, considering that we had people come down here, sign up to speak on it, and that you have at least one council member and possibly more who would like the opportunity to just vote to say that the city of Austin should do a comprehensive independent third-party audit without making Mr. Butt spend the time and energy that he says he's going to defeat a common sense, really basic good government measure.
Okay, any further discussion on the Renteria amendment? Ms. Houston?
Mayor, if I had been here, I would have voted against Code Next.
I voted against it? Okay.
So,
I'm sorry, the vote would have been 6-5.
yes.
She would have voted in favor of the item. It would have been defeated 5-6.
To include the,
Okay.
Were you asking to include
Continue.
your vote in the record, though? Okay.
She's not here, but it is noted that had she been here, that's how she would have voted. Further discussion on the rent-to-re amendment? Yes, Councilmember Poole.
so the Renteria amendment is the one that has Mayor Adler at the top, and I wanted to check
Yes.
with Councilmember Troxclair if she had an amendment to that or
Yes,
a substitute.
I would like to make a substitute motion
Okay.
and offer my language that is Troxclair motion sheet number 1 that says, shall a city ordinance be adopted requiring a comprehensive, independent, third-party efficiency audit of all city operations and budget. This language is unbiased. It most clearly mirrors what was in the petition. I think that it respects the will of the people who signed the petition.
Let's
and
do this real
protects-
fast. Is there a second to the amendment to the amendment? Councilmember Poole makes that. Go ahead, Mr. Troxler.
That's it.
Okay.
I mean, I want to,
Okay.
yep.
It's been moved and seconded, Troxler amendment to this proposition K. Further discussion? Yes, Mr. Flanagan.
So I really struggle with this one. I think had the ordinance been offered, I probably would have voted for it. Not because I think it's a silver bullet, but because I think at worst we're spending the city's money on an audit that a future council will likely ignore. We get a lot of audits from our city auditor. We get special projects, and often when those audit reports don't comport with existing beliefs, then the auditor is called into question. And we've seen this happen to other staff too, and I don't think that's a good practice. And I don't think it would be any different with the result of a third-party audit. That being said, I think based on my analysis of ballot language requirements, the fact that there is a cost is an important element. And I think the fact that we have a city auditor who has been excluded from this process is also an important element. I'm going to avoid the wordsmithing process because I don't think there's the will or the votes to go into that. So I have the odd position of opposing Councilmember Troxclair's language, but would have supported the original ordinance.
Okay, any further discussion on the Troxclair amendment to the amendment? Yes, Councilmember Troxclair.
I just wanted to make sure that everybody saw and that it's entered into the record that I handed out an email correspondence with Corey Stokes, our city auditor, if I can read it really quickly, that says, as discussed, while we are independent of city operations, we do not typically conduct large-scope projects like the proposed efficiency study. Specifically, we select more narrowly focused topics and then focus on risks within each selected topic to identify opportunities to improve effectiveness and efficiency. Focusing on those high risks helps us cover more topics than we would otherwise be able to audit. So I think it's really clear from this correspondence that she does not do the kind of work that is being considered in this comprehensive audit. And I also want to point out, as the chair of Audit and Finance, that the other external auditor being mentioned here is purely a financial auditor. That's an accounting tool. It has nothing to do with performance auditing. So I really think that legally the best route to move forward for the city is to adopt the simple language.
Councilmember Kassar.
In looking at Ms. Stokes' email, I think it says that this is not something that she typically does, but it's equally clear in the ordinance as presented by the petitioners that it's something that she is, under this ordinance, not going to be allowed to do. So regardless of whether it's something that we did want her to do or didn't want her to do, under the ordinance being presented, she would not be allowed to do it, nor would any of the firms that have had a contract with the city the last 5 years be allowed to do it. And so I still think that it provides transparency and truth in what it is that's being presented. So I see Ms. Stokes' email as clarifying and actually still supportive of the language that's been offered by Councilmember Renteria and the mayor that I seconded. And I also think that making sure that we don't confuse voters into thinking that they are voting to instate our current city auditor, but instead a separate auditor, I think provides a level of transparency as well.
Anything else before we vote? Yes, Mayor Pro Tem?
Yeah, I agree. I have heard people talk about the need for an external audit at various points over the last few years, and it's at least some of those calling for an external audit have been unaware that we have an internal auditor here who does terrific work. And so I agree both in this. I agree with your assessment, Councilmember Kassar, that I also don't read the city auditor's email as suggesting that she would be unable to do that. I would also just say, by way of background, we also have had a little bit of this discussion during previous budget sessions about whether we should do full-scale sunset review of departments. And at the time, the city manager started an initiative to look at departments rather thoroughly and to look at their performance and to look for efficiencies. So it's just true that we're doing a lot of that work already, but I do think it's important to clarify for voters that we have an internal auditor already.
Okay. Anything else before we vote? Yes, Councilmember Poole.
So this one is really hard for me because I have been interviewed about my reasons not to support the efficiency audit as it was crafted in the petition, and I went into some pretty extensive detail with Ken Martin and talked about how I thought this would fit under our strategic planning process the new planning process that we have at the city, that we could approach this internally through the city manager's office and our Office of Performance Management and do it under the same kind of strategic planning outcomes that we have put together, that we finished last year and that we are putting our budget through. But so my position on whether I want this to pass or not, though I am keeping separate from my support for the clear, simple language from the caption and the same reasons that I argued to include Code Next in the other Proposition J, is because I think that that is a truer verbatim expression of what the petition was, and then we leave it to the voters with the educational materials that we provide in the campaign that's out in the community before the vote happens to make those distinctions. So my reason for voting for providing the second to this is the same reason why I was supporting our previous work on Proposition K. And I'll vote in support of this because I believe that we should go with the clearer caption language. And it doesn't have anything to do with whether I agree with the substance of the vote that we would take in the community.
Thank you. I have a question for the manager. Did you look at what these kind of surveys cost by the companies that were doing them, or the work company that was recommended by the folks that were offering this petition?
Our finance staff was able to look at some, yeah.
And does this range accurately reflect what your staff estimated what the cost would be?
It does.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion on the amendment? Yes, Councilmember Troxler.
Manager, were the entities that the staff looked at, were they comparable in size and scope to the Austin City budget and staff, or were they entire states?
It was hard to find, Councilmember, it was hard to find one that was exactly the same size and scope. So there were some that were at the state level, but maybe a smaller scope. Some were at a city level, but a smaller scope. And so we used some of those estimates to derive that this was an accurate estimate.
Okay. Let's take a vote on the Troxler amendment to the amendment. Those in favor, please raise your hands. Troxler, Alter, Houston, and Poole. Those opposed, raise your hand. It's the balance of the dais. The amendment to the amendment is not passed. Let's vote on the amendment that raises K.
Mr. Mayor, we didn't vote on the previous amendment.
And it's been pointed out to me, so we're going to vote on this, and we're going to vote on yours. I apologize for that.
Mayor.
The amendment to the amendment was defeated. We're now to the amendment. Mayor Pro Tem.
Mayor, I have an amendment to propose to item J, if now's the appropriate time.
No, let's vote on K real fast, and then we'll go to J. Let's finish with K. Those in favor of the amendment that with K, the rent-to-re amendment, please raise your hand. Those opposed? Troxler, Alter voting no, Houston voting no. The others voting aye. It passes. Now let's talk about
Mayor, I have one more amendment on K.
I'm sorry, what?
I have one more amendment on K. I'm sorry,
Okay.
it's being passed very slowly.
Okay, let's go ahead and finish on J, because I skipped over that one I shouldn't have. We voted on the amendment to Amendment J, but we have yet to vote on J. So we're back to J. Mayor Pro Tem, did you have an amendment you wanted to make to that?
Yes, I do, Mayor. I'd like to make an amendment to J, and that is to insert the words code next or before the word future.
Okay, Mayor Pro Tem moves to insert the words code next or before we have future comprehensive land development code. Is
Mr.
there a
Mayor,
second?
didn't we already vote on that? That was part of the previous
It was,
amendment.
but there were two elements to the previous one.
Oh, so you're
This only
separating
has
them.
one
That's right.
element.
Okay.
We could have done the same thing by dividing the question before, and we just didn't do it. Is there a second to the Mayor Pro Tem's amendment? Councilmember Alter does that. Any discussion on this? Let's take a vote. Ms. Houston?
Which one are we voting on now? I've got two.
It is
Is it altars or is it kitchens?
Kitchens, J. And the Mayor Pro Tem is wanting to add the words code next or before the words future comprehensive land development.
So if I could speak to that for just a minute.
On
Okay.
kitchens motion.
That's right. Yeah, we voted, as we discussed, we voted on Councilmember Alter's while you were off the dais, and it had two elements in it. One was two differences between K and J. One was the waiting period. The other was the absence of code next. And so given that that failed, I'm proposing that we add code next or into the language in this one. So I was asked
Okay.
why,
Did
and
you
I'll
want to
just say
speak
for
to
the
it,
reasons
Mayor Pro
already.
Tem?
What's that?
Did you want to speak to it?
Yeah, this really is the same reason I offered for my support of Councilmember Alters. I believe that it's important, given the context of the discussion we've been having, to have the words code next in there, since that is, in common parlance, how many people have come to think about the land development code revision.
And I pose this for the same reasons given earlier. I think that if we take the instruction from the court, there is no code next, and therefore it's misleading to suggest that there is, because there's not. What this really is a forever determination on how we deal with comprehensive changes to the land development code or laws, and that's what we should be taking to the voters. And I think it'd be confusing in this instance because some people think that the vote in November is going to be an up or down vote on a code next product, which it's not and there isn't. So I think it's confusing and misleading to add that language. Any further discussion before we vote?
So, Mayor, are we voting on the audit?
No, this is the code next one. This is the kitchen language. And we're talking about, do we add the words code next into the kitchen language? Okay. Do we add the words code next?
Mayor.
Those in favor
Mayor.
of the, I'm sorry, yes, Ms. Flanagan?
So I just wanted to note to the Mayor Pro Tem, and I know we haven't agreed to disagree on this, but I don't believe that code next is common parlance. It certainly isn't in my district, but I know that we just agreed to disagree on that.
Okay. Let's take a vote. Those in favor of the Mayor Pro Tem's amendment to the amendment, please raise your hand. Troxclair, Alter, the Mayor Pro Tem, Houston, and Poole. Those opposed, please raise your hand. 5 to 6, it's defeated. Let's now vote on the amendment J. Those in favor of the amendment J, please raise your hand. Those opposed? Poole voting no. I'm sorry, what?
This versus the base motion?
This is not the basic, this is J. This is Kitchen's amendment.
Okay.
We've discussed amendments to the amendment. They have not passed. We're now back to voting on the Kitchen Amendment J.
Okay, I'd like to abstain on that.
That contains the language up to 3 years, does not contain code next.
As it's amending the staff's recommended language.
Correct.
Would someone please remind me what the staff's recommended language was? I simply don't have that in front of me at the moment.
Mayor, are we voting on the audit ballot language? Is that what, are we going, we're still on the,
Yes, the J. It says a J in front of it. This is not the audit language. This is the, and for the life of me, I don't know what I've done with it. It has Part 8. In the upper right-hand corner, it has August 9, 2018, Agenda Item 113, Motion Sheet, Amended Ordinance Part 8, and it says Proposition J. That's what we're voting on.
I thought we just voted.
We voted to amendments to this.
Okay.
So we're running through, there have been several amendments to this that have been offered. None of them have passed, but now we have to vote on this.
So we voting on the base.
We're not voting on the, we're voting on the kitchen amendment.
Got it.
Okay.
Those in favor of the kitchen amendment, please raise your hand. Those opposed to the kitchen amendment, please raise your hand. It is Troxclair, Alter, Mayor Pro Tem, Houston, and Poole. The others voting against the amendment. No, the others voting for the amendment. It passes 6-5. We are now to the base motion. Part J and Part K have been amended. We are.
Are we voting on? I have another amendment for
Now,
K.
Okay.
Okay.
Mr. Troxler?
So this basically says we have already been told that based on the ballot language that we're about to adopt, that we are going to be sued. If that suit is successful, we would have to come back and put in place new ballot language. This simply says that if a suit is successful, we'll insert the basic, the option 1 ballot language. Shall a city ordinance be adopted requiring comprehensive independent third-party efficiency audit for all city operations and budget, so that we don't have to come back and have this discussion all over again. It's just a backup just in case the lawsuit is successful.
She's going to move it.
Mr. Troxler moves this amendment to add alternate ballot language to Proposition K. Is there a second to that amendment? Ms. Houston seconds that amendment. Discussion. Mr. Flanagan.
So I appreciate the effort here, but my concern is that whatever alternative language might be crafted needs to be in response to the judge's ruling. So I would be hesitant to predetermine what parts of the original language were ruled improper by the court. We're a pretty active body, more so than just about any other elected body in maybe the entire state of Texas. So I'm pretty sure we'll be around to fix it post haste whenever a judge completes their ruling.
I feel the same way. We just don't know what the court's going to do. The court could adopt the language and say the language we have isn't fine. The court could say it's not fine because you mentioned the in-house auditor, but everything else is okay. Or the court could say you can't mention the external auditor, but everything else is okay. Or they could say those mentions are okay, but the dollar amount was okay. And they could say you shouldn't have said $1 to $5 million. You should have said a different number. I mean, we just don't know what the court would say. So picking the right answer at this point doesn't seem right to me. We should wait to see what the court says. Any further discussion on the Troxler amendment? Or you could say. All right, take a vote. Those in favor of this amendment, Troxler amendment, please raise your hand. Houston voting yes, Troxler and Alta voting yes. Those voting no, please raise your hand. It's the balance of the dais with Councilmember Poole abstaining. It is not passed. We're now back to the base motion. Councilmember Troxler.
Mayor, I'm very sorry. I have one more quick amendment. It would just add to the end of the base motion, at an estimated cost of $1 to $5 million, that will potentially identify $160 million or more in annual savings opportunities for the city. Because I believe if we include the potential cost of the audit, which we do not know, that we should also include the potential savings that will come out of the audit.
Okay, Councilmember Troxler proposes potential savings of what number did you say?
The lowest estimate I have heard is $160 million. So it says,
your amendment says what?
It says that will potentially identify $160 million or more.
160 is the number. Is there a second to that amendment? Is there a second? Ms. Houston seconds that. Discussion?
You could have not seconded, we can go home.
What's the basis for the 160 million as opposed to 180 million or 120 million?
So just like the city, you and the city manager mentioned earlier that you used estimates based on the other cities and states, that the cost estimates of how much they had spent on the audit, how much those same entities saved on the audit was 4 to 6, generally 4 to 6%, 4 to 8% of their budget. 4% of our $4 billion budget is $160 million. So it's basically just extrapolating the same math that you use to come up with the $1 to $5 million and using that to apply it to the results as well.
And that 4 to 6%, was that savings because they changed the budgets, or was that the recommendations of the audit?
That is the recommendations of the plan. So potentially identify $160 million or more.
Okay. Any further discussion on this? Yes, Mr. Flanagan.
And I would just say that I think there's a distinction in terms of my understanding of the requirements of ballot language, that there is a cost associated with the approval of this, but there is no guarantee of anything beyond the cost of doing this, and so that would be improper to put in the ballot language because there are too many steps between the decision the voter is making and that thing occurring.
All right, let's go ahead and take a vote. Those in favor of the Troxclair amendment, please raise your hand. Mr. Troxclair, anyone else? Ms. Houston, those opposed, raise your hand. It's the balance of the dais with Councilmember Alter abstaining.
Thank you.
All right, we're now back to the base motion. Yes, Councilmember Garza.
This is everything. Okay, I just wanted to quickly say that I too have reservations about the charter amendments on here. We haven't had time to talk about them. That being said, it's my understanding the democracy dollars are one that do not have to be a charter amendment. Is that correct, City Attorney and City Manager?
That's correct. We had sent something that said that that could be done through a city ordinance. There were some issues with exactly how it would operate, but you could do it through ordinance.
Okay, and so I guess I'd give the direction for our city manager to look further into that, and then either the staff could bring it or a council member could bring it too, because I think that's an interesting concept that we should further explore.
I think there'd be some task force or study or analysis of that. I concur with Councilmember Garza. All right.
Mr. Mayor?
We have a motion and a second to the base motion. Yes.
I'd just like to take a second and thank you, Councilmember Garza, for bringing that up. I also think that the democracy dollars is an intriguing idea, and I think we should take some steps. So I appreciate you making that request to investigate it further.
Councilmember Flanagan?
I will not request to divide the question of these items because I would have preferred to have a longer conversation about my preference for or against some of the individual bond propositions for the sake of all of our sanity and the fact that I said most of that back in June. I'll just vote for the whole thing, but I just wanted that on the record.
Thank you. Let's vote on the base motion. Those in favor, please raise your hands. Those opposed? It's unanimous on the dais. Ms. Troxler is voting no. Ms. Houston is off the dais. The others voting aye. This item passes because we have put the audit on the ballot. Item number 112 is withdrawn.
Mayor?
Yes. Ms. Troxler.
I would like to take a vote on item number 112. If I get a second, can we take a vote as a council on item number 112?
No, because it wouldn't be proper for us to vote on 112 at this point because we have a choice to make and we've made that choice.
So I think I asked 4 times before we voted on that item.
You did.
And can you explain to me why I wasn't given why the dais wasn't given the opportunity to vote on that?
Because the choice for the council is either to do A or to do B. And we could either consider A or we could consider B. There's no requirement that we either consider A or we consider B. But we're only going to consider one. If that fails, then we would have to consider the other.
Is there anything prohibiting? Is there a requirement prohibit? I don't expect it to pass based on the votes that we just taken. I would like to vote on that item. Is there anything prohibiting me from making a motion to pass item number 112 if I get a second?
Yes, because I think that would be an improper action. It would require us to reconsider the vote.
It's only improper if it passes. If it passes, then we have a conflict. But if it does not pass, there is no conflict.
I hear you. I don't think it's the proper thing for us to do.
Okay,
you could challenge that decision.
Mayor, I'm going to move that we adjourn the meeting.
I'm going to make a motion for us to pass item number 112. Is there a second?
It's out of order. We have nothing. Now, you could ask my ruling to be overturned, but that would be the vote that we would have. Okay? I think we're done. Those are all the items.
To adjourn.
All right. It is now 12:44, and this meeting is adjourned.
You're just like me. You see things the way they could be seen, but you make them so much more. Some people waste a lifetime